Welcome everyone to our Bumblebee Atlas Protocols training for Missouri, Nebraska, and Great Plains Atlas participants. We are so excited that you are here today, joining us on a Saturday morning. The Missouri, Nebraska, and Great Plains Bumblebee Atlas projects are all Xerces affiliated. Katie and I both also work for the Xerces Society. Xerces is a science-based nonprofit organization. We're focused on invertebrate conservation. And I just wanted to acknowledge the folks who are in the audience today who are Xerces members. We could not do this work without you, and we are so appreciative of your support. Just as a reminder, I also want to let you all know that this is part 2 of a 2-part training series. Today, we're going to be talking about Atlas protocols, giving you the information that you need so that you can go out and do surveys independently. But before this, we held a training earlier this year that went over bumblebee ecology and conservation, giving you guys the background information that you need to get started with the project. So if you haven't viewed that video already, please make sure to give it a watch. It is now currently posted to YouTube. All right, just to go over what we'll be talking about today, I'm going to give you guys a really brief overview of the project. We'll discuss how to sign up for the Atlas and then how to conduct a survey. After that, Katie will take you through how to submit your data, and then Jared will walk you through Bumblebee ID for the region, and we'll talk a little bit about how to photograph bumblebees as well at the end. All right, jumping into the project overview. The Bumblebee Atlas is a community science project that's focused on tracking and monitoring bumblebees. This is a collaborative effort. We work with lots and lots of different partners to make this project happen, and now we are currently in 20 different states. The Bumblebee Atlas is focused on one group of pollinators, bumblebees, and there are lots of different reasons to target this group. The first one is that many bumblebee species are imperiled. About a quarter of the species in the US are considered either threatened or endangered. So we're interested in them from a conservation perspective. Bumblebees are also really important for the environment. They are amazing pollinators. They are generalists. They forage on lots of different kinds of plants and lots of different types of habitats. So they're really important pollinators for lots of different species of flowers. They also have a really unique ecological niche. They are able to forage in colder climates and when the weather is cooler outside. They're really big bees and they can warm themselves up by twitching their flight muscles. So you'll see them sometimes foraging when the weather is a little bit cool, when it's a little bit rainy out. And for that reason, they're really important pollinators of spring blooming flowers and plants that are blooming when it's a little bit chilly outside. They're also a really great target for community science because they are so charismatic. They're really big, they're really fluffy, they're basically the teddy bears of the pollinator world. And they've been charismatic for a long time. People have loved bumblebees for, a century at least. And we actually have really decent historical data on bumblebees compared to other species. And so for that reason, we can actually track their status, which is really, really cool and exciting. As I mentioned previously, the Bumblebee Atlas is a community science project, and what that means is that we rely on the time and the effort of community scientists like you. Our participants go out and conduct formal surveys for bumblebees, and from that data that they collect, we can do things like monitor population changes, monitor the distribution of species, and then fill in knowledge gaps relating to habitat associations and flora preferences. And then we can use that information to form evidence-based recommendations for people who are doing on-the-ground land management work. Just to re-emphasize how important this work is, the data that you collect is shared with researchers, and we can think of it as being a small piece of a bigger puzzle. You are collecting data in your state, but from your data, you are giving us a bigger picture of what's going on with species across the region, which is really exciting. For the next part of the talk, I want to talk a bit about how you can sign up for the Atlas. Our goal with this project is to spread out our effort across the entire region. And so to encourage people to get out and survey undersurveyed regions, we divide each state up into these really big grid cells. Each one is 50 by 50 kilometers, and our grid map covers the entire state we're in for each project. So to sign up for the project, what you do is you adopt a grid cell. And what that means is that you're making a pledge to do at least 2 surveys within that grid cell sometime during our survey period, starting in June 1st and ending September 30th. Our priorities are different for each state. So in Missouri and Nebraska, we are currently in year 3 of the Target Zones program. The Target Zones program is an optional effort to help monitor species of greatest conservation need in specific areas. So the target zones that you see here, those blotches of different colors, are areas where we think at-risk species are most likely to occur. So those are places where we've historically seen those species, either recently via the atlas or from historic data that was collected a long time ago. So as I mentioned, year 3 of the Target Zones program, we want to encourage folks to go out and do surveys in those target zones during the peak of the survey season in July and August. We've made excellent progress on this program so far. Since we started in 2023, participants have visited over 70% of the target zones in each state. So those target zones that you see in gray there, those are the target zones that have been surveyed at least once. Those target zones are in blue are target zones that haven't been surveyed yet. And so you can see from the maps, we've hit a lot of them. There are some areas in the northwestern corner of Missouri and in central Nebraska we haven't gotten to yet, but we've made really, truly amazing progress so far. All right, so 2025, last year of the program, our goal is to try to visit every target zone in each state by the end of 2025. So if you're interested in participating in this program, we really encourage you to try to get out to those target zones that we haven't visited yet. Right, so if you are interested in participating, here's how you do it. As I mentioned, we are trying to prioritize these target zones during the peak of the survey season in July and August. So in June, you can just survey your grid cell as usual. You don't need to focus on the target zones. But when July and August roll around, what we encourage you to do is try to find a survey area within one of those target zones when you're looking for a survey site. In September, at the tail end of the season, you can go ahead and survey as usual. You don't need to prioritize those target zones at that time. As I mentioned, we really would like to try to hit every single target zone by the end of 2025, since it's the last year of the program. But if you can't make it out to one of those blue target zones, that's totally okay. It's also great if you want to survey a target zone that's already been surveyed. That's still also very helpful. And just as a reminder, the Target Zones program is 100% optional. You don't need to survey in a target zone at all during that peak period. To participate in the Bumblebee Atlas in these states, any data you collect anywhere is still really, really helpful. This is just an option for you if you want to make the biggest impact and help us collect more data on those at-risk species that we're interested in. And I'll hand it off to Katie to tell you about priorities in the Great Plains.
Thanks, Jenny. Okay, so for everyone in North Dakota, South Dakota, and Kansas, we sent an email around a couple weeks ago, basically letting you know that the project is going to look a little bit different this year than it has in past. And that's mainly because the grant that has supported this effort the last 3 years is now complete. So we don't have any funding for the project right now, but we are continuing to look for funds. So in the meantime this year, we're going to continue this effort and really rely on the skills that you've built up. We're not going to be offering in-person trainings this year, but hopefully in 2026, we'll be able to get this program up and running like it has been the last 3 years. So because of that, we're trying to make this season a little bit more flexible and allow you to sort of prioritize many different areas here. So all the green cells that you see on this map are priority grids for this year. And these represent grid cells that have less than 4 surveys in them. And you can see some of them have 0 surveys, some of them have only been surveyed once. So if you go out to one of these green grid cells, try and prioritize one that has a lower number. But just like Jenny said, for Nebraska and Missouri, a survey in any grid cell is going to help, but if you want to sort of target your impact, aim for one of the grid cells that is green with a low number. And this map is also going to live on the website, so you can sort of reference it again if you need to. But all the numbers that you're seeing on there are basically how many times somebody has been to that grid cell. All right,
Awesome.
back to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Katie. All right. I want to show you all how you can go to the website and adopt a grid cell. So I'm just going to stop my screen share. I'm going to share my new screen with the Bumblebee Atlas website up. Hopefully you can all see that. It looks good to me. All right, so if you are interested in adopting a grid cell, the first step is to visit the Bumblebee Atlas website, bumblebeeatlas.org. And from there, you can go to this page, Get Involved, and hit Adopt a Grid Cell. And that will bring you to the Adopt a Grid Cell page. So the first thing that you are going to see when you visit the Adopt a Grid Cell page is a few reminders. Please make sure you double check to make sure that you have completed these steps before you decide what grid cell you would like to adopt. If you've made sure you've completed the steps, the next step is to check out our grid adoption map. So to do that, you can just scroll down, and from there you will be able to explore the different grid cells in each state. So after you exit out of the welcome page, you can go ahead and zoom in to the region that you're interested in. So let's say you are based in Nebraska, you can zoom in, and that as you approach Nebraska, you'll be able to see the grid map with all of the grid numbers as well as the target zones. So if you are interested in, say, finding out what grid cell overlaps with the city that you live in, you can do things like type in the city name. So if you're based in, say, Lincoln, Nebraska, you can type that in, and then if you click it, it will zoom you in to that area. So if I zoom out a little bit, I can see that Lincoln overlaps with Nebraska grid cell number 36. You can also explore the map by just sort of moving your cursor around. Let's say you are planning to go on a little vacation somewhere to the west. You can check out the other grid cells that are in the region and make your selection based on that. Once you've decided what grid cell you are planning to adopt, it's really helpful to look at what public lands are within that grid cell. And to help you do that, we have this really nice layer for public areas in the United States. So if you go to layers and you click on the visibility for USA protected areas, it will bring up public lands in that grid cell. So you can explore those as well. If you scroll in pretty close to the area you're interested in, you will be able to click on it, and that will bring up information about that particular site. So if I'm too zoomed out, what I click on will be the grid map. So you really need to zoom in to be able to click on the public land that you're interested in. But once you're zoomed in, you can click on it and it will bring up the name of the public area, who manages it, as well as some other relevant information that can be super helpful when you're trying to find a place to survey within your grid cell. For Missouri and Nebraska, you will also be able to look at the target zones in your grid cell as well. If you click on them in the grid map, it will bring up the target zone, what species we're targeting, and then whether or not it's been surveyed yet, as well as the number of times it's been surveyed between 2020 and 2023 and 2024. If you are interested in a clearer view of what target zones have and haven't been surveyed yet, we also have maps on the Nebraska and Missouri landing pages, which show exactly which grid cells have and haven't been surveyed yet. I'll show you those in a moment here. But first, I want to show you how exactly you sign up for your grid cell after you decide what grid cell you're interested in. So once you've picked your grid cell, the next step is to fill out the grid adoption form. So if you scroll to the bottom of the page, it will bring up a form called Adopt a Grid Cell. All you need to do is fill that out, select the grid cell that you're interested in based on the map that you explored, and then hit submit. After that, you will receive an email from us confirming that you've adopted that grid cell, and then you'll be good to go. All right, and as I mentioned for Missouri and Nebraska, we also have some other maps to help you decide where you want to survey. So if I go to the Missouri Bumblebee Atlas landing page, we have a really nifty section called Survey Priorities. And there's a map associated with that, which shows you where we have and haven't surveyed target zones. So those gray target zones, as I mentioned, those are the ones we haven't surveyed yet. Those blue ones are the ones that we're really interested in. So if you want to survey target zones this year, please check that map out. It's a nice resource to have as well. All right. And I'm going to bring up the main content of my presentation. Give me 1 second to get that sorted. All right, so for the next part of the talk, we will talk about how to conduct a survey. So when and where you survey is really up to you. As I mentioned previously, our minimum requirement is that once you've adopted a grid cell, you do at least 2 surveys in that grid cell sometime between June 1st and September 30th. You don't want to just go out whenever. You want to make sure that the conditions are optimal. So for bumblebees, they are not going to be flying when it's really cold outside or really hot or when it's raining outside. So you want to make sure that the temperatures are between 60 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit, that wind speeds are below 20 miles per hour, and that it's not actively raining outside when you're doing your survey. Where you survey is also up to you. You can survey anywhere in your grid cell as long as you have permission to survey there and the appropriate permits. So this can be on private land either that you own or that is owned by a friend or family member, as long as you have permission. If you do need to survey your own private land, you want to make sure that it's at least a hectare in size if you're doing a point survey. If you have a small yard, even if you have a lot of really great flowers, even if it's below a hectare in size, you can't do a point survey there. You can also survey on public lands. Public land is where I generally choose to survey when I'm out doing a survey for the Bumblebee Atlas. Public land is generally owned or managed by the government or an organization like the Nature Conservancy. You often need permits to survey on public land. Making sure that you have the appropriate permits and permissions is really important. Some things to keep in mind when you are surveying. You want to make sure that you are respecting private property and that you have permission from the landowner to conduct survey activities. So unless you have explicit permission from a private landowner, make sure that you are staying on public lands and right-of-ways. Please note that your grid cell can include both public land and private land, and you must not trespass on private land. So when you're at a site, you want to make sure that you're looking really carefully for markers of private land. And then if you find yourself on private property without permission, or you've been asked to leave, please make sure to leave immediately, even if your conservation activity is not complete. For your own protection from trespass claims, you want to make sure that the permission that you have is written and that you carry that written document with you while you're surveying. You also want to make sure that you obtain manager permission for serving areas like county or city or local parks. All right, so finding a place to survey is a big step. So we have some umbrella permits to help you with that. So in Nebraska, we have a permit for surveying Nebraska game and park property. So that includes state parks, wildlife management areas, state recreation areas, etc. You will need to be specifically named on this permit to use it. So please contact us at our email, nebumblebeeatlas@xerces.org. to be named on the permit. We are going to send this in on Monday, so please do it as soon as possible if you are interested in surveying on Nebraska Game and Park property and you would like to be on our permit. In Missouri, no permits are required, but you will need to sign a volunteer agreement with MDC if you want to survey MDC property. In Kansas, if you will want to survey anywhere in Kansas, so on public land or private land, you will need to apply for and obtain your own scientific collecting permit from the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. This is a new thing, so please make sure to do this before you start surveying. To help you complete your application, Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks has developed a template for you so that you can fill that out and then obtain that permit. In North Dakota, we no longer hold a permit to survey North Dakota state parks, so please don't survey in those areas unless you've already obtained a permit, your own permit. And then in South Dakota, we are currently working on obtaining a new permit that would allow you to survey on South Dakota Game, Fish, and Parks property. So please don't survey in those areas until you've received further guidance from us about permitting. Katie, do you have anything to add to that about permits for states?
No, for anyone in South Dakota, we're still working on that permit, so just keep an eye on your email and we'll let you know as soon as we get that.
Thanks, Katie. And also, you don't need to memorize all of this information. It is available on our permits page on the Bumblebee Atlas website. So please check that out if you want to reference that information or find any of those forms or guidance that we just mentioned. All right, just a little bit more information about public lands. If you want to survey in an area like a city or county park, we recommend that you contact the area manager to see if permits are required. For U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service land, you will need a permit, and the Atlas currently doesn't hold our own permit yet, so please don't survey those lands unless you've obtained your own permit. For U.S. Forest Service lands, you do not need a permit for the Dakotas or Kansas. And in Missouri, we're checking to see whether or not you'll need a permit, so keep an eye out for updates from us on that. But if you are going to go out and survey Forest Service land, please make sure that you contact the appropriate district manager or area manager before you survey for safety reasons. It's always a good idea to contact the manager to let them know if you're going to go out to a property because they could be doing activities like a controlled burn or spraying for pesticides, and you just want to check in with them before you go out. For national parks, the Xerces Society holds permits for multiple national parks. So if you are interested in surveying one of those national parks, please contact us and we might be able to help guide you regarding permitting. All right, so what does a survey actually comprise of? Each survey comprises of two parts. The part where you monitor bumblebees, the bumblebee survey, and then a really rapid assessment of habitat. There are two ways that you can do a bumblebee survey. The first way is by doing a point survey. So if you do a point survey, you are basically surveying a hectare-sized area for bumblebees for a period of 45 person minutes. If you're planning on doing a point survey, please make sure to let somebody know when and where you'll be and when to expect you back, because it's always a good field safety practice to do so when you're planning to do any field work. Right, so to do a point survey, you will use a method called catch, chill, photograph, and release. So basically, once you've selected your survey area, that hectare-sized area somewhere, you're basically going to start your timer and start walking slowly through the survey area, collecting all of the bumblebees that you spot. Once you spot a bumblebee, you're going to want to pause your timer because that 45 person minutes only counts time that you're spending actively searching for bees. So things like transferring a bee from a net to a vial, taking notes, putting bees in a cooler, that sort of thing, that's not going to be time that you're going to want to count toward your 45 person minutes. You're just counting the time you're spending actively looking for bees. So as you're walking slowly through your survey area, you want to catch every bee that you spot. Pausing your timer to put the bee from your net into a vial and then putting it in the cooler. If you are going out with more than one person, say a friend, you can split up that 45 person minutes between yourselves. So if you are going out with 2 other people and you're in a group of 3, you would each need to only survey for 15 person minutes in order to complete that survey. When you are doing your point survey, you want to make sure that you walk through the entire survey area. So if you see a patch of flowers with tons and tons of bumblebees, you don't want to get stuck there just catching bumblebees. You kind of want to prioritize both covering the entire area that you are surveying as well as catching lots of bees. So moving continuously through the area that you're surveying is important. Right. So as an alternative, you can also do a roadside survey. So this is the other way that you can complete a survey for the Bumblebee Atlas. So rather than stopping at a single point and doing a survey, you are going to instead make 5 stops along a 10-mile stretch of road that are at least a half a mile apart. And at each one of these stops, you're going to want to stop and collect bumblebees for a period of 15 person minutes. When you are doing a roadside survey, you want to make sure that you are respecting property ownership, local regulations, and posted signs. Once again, as you're planning your surveys and going out, make sure that somebody knows your plan and when to expect you back. It's always a good field safety practice to do so. And then when you're doing a roadside survey, it's also a really good idea to make sure you're wearing bright colors or a neon vest so that you're really visible to the people who are on the road. So doing a roadside survey, you're basically going to use the same catch, chill, release methods to monitor bumblebees. You're going to catch all of the bumblebees that you see in that little patch of flowers where you make your stop. You're going to pop them in your cooler, let them cool down so that they're still so that you can go ahead and photograph them after that. All right, so catching the bumblebees and putting them in vials is a really important step of doing a survey, but unfortunately we can't show you that right now because, I'm sitting at a desk. We're all sitting at desks. But we do want to play you a short video walking you through how to do that. I am going to turn off my video just to make sure that the streaming goes through properly. And I'm going to hit play.
When you're out collecting your bumblebees, you want
It doesn't sound like my sound is on.
It's working.
Oh, it is? Okay, great.
Yeah.
to make sure you're doing it carefully, but you also want to make sure you're doing it with a technique where you're actually going to be successful in capturing the bumblebee. Now, the best way to do it is to come from the side. You'll actually sweep over the tops of the flowers, but the most important part is to make sure you follow through and have the net droop over the side of the rim, and you can actually flip it over a third time so the bee can't escape. And another way, you can come from below the bee if the flower's kind of drooping, and you can come up, but again, you have to have that follow through where you flip the net over the top. Another way, if you're feeling a little more timid about sweeping really hard, is bees tend to fly up when they try to escape. So you can actually put the net over the top of the flowers that it's on, and the bee will usually fly up to the top of the net, or once it gets about halfway, you can just tip the net over, and then it'll be captured in the bottom of your net.
All right, we're gonna watch one more short video. On how to put a bee from the net into your vial. I'm just gonna hit play.
So once you've collected your bee, you're going to gather the net up so that the bee is restricted to one part of the net. And then you're going to take your vial with the lid off, slide it up the net to that area where you've kind of narrowed or bottlenecked the net. You'll slide the bee into the vial, and keep that net nice and tight over the top of the vial. Once he's in there, you can take your lid, you can slide it up the net to get to where the top of the vial is, and then you can sometimes keep the net inside the opening and then slide the net out once your lid's on top. Or you can just, if he's cooperating or she's cooperating, you can just slide the lid right over the top, and then you've got your bumblebee. Once you've collected it, you can put it in your cooler or put it on ice, or so you can prepare to process that bee once you're done with your survey. Once you've collected your bee, another thing that's helpful to do post-processing is to collect a flower that you collected the bee on, and you can pop the flower into the vial with the bee you collected on that plant, so when you're processing the bee later, you remember what flower it was collected on. If you don't have a cooler when you're out in the field, either you're in a remote location or you just don't have one with you, you can always use your photo chamber. So you can take your photo chamber and you can collect the bee into the chamber instead of a vial. And you can get it up into the open side, and then you can take the plunger and you slide the plunger underneath it. And then once you slide that plunger down, your bee is available to photograph.
All right. All right, so those videos I find really handy in learning netting techniques. You can always re-review them before you go out and do your survey on your own. Definitely recommend practicing a few times before you officially start your survey, catching a few bumblebees, swinging your net around. Even if it's just at a flower head that doesn't have a bee on it, getting a feel for your net is a great way to start off when you are new to the project and learning how to collect bumblebees. All right, so after you have done your survey for bumblebees and have collected all of your bees and put them in a cooler, the next step is to photo document them. So you want to wait until your bees are completely cold and they are still before you try to take pictures. And then once they're cold, you can just pull them out of the vials, put them on top of your cooler or on top of your data sheet. You have a really nice little grid data sheet for you to take photos on, which is available on the Atlas website. And you're just going to put them down and then take your pictures. When you're taking pictures, it's really, really important to keep track of which photos are associated with which bee. You want to make sure that you're recording this information on your data sheet as you're taking your photos. So if you're using a digital camera, making sure that you're recording what photo numbers are associated with which bee is really important. If you are using your cell phone, what I like to do is write down the time stamp of each photo that I took for each bee. Or if you would like to, some people just write in on like a sticky note or something the information associated with the bee. So if this is bee number 3, they'll put that in the photo view. So when they're taking pictures, that information is right there for them when they're going to upload their photos to Bumblebee Watch. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, each bumblebee survey comes with 2 parts, the part where you actually document bumblebees and then the rapid habitat assessment. So these rapid habitat assessments are not meant to be exhaustive. They should only take you 5 to 20 minutes, depending on how complex your survey area is and how experienced you are. We want to pair the information about the habitat with the bumblebee surveys so that we can figure out what's going on with bumblebee populations. So the habitat assessments, you're basically just going to be recording some really basic information about the habitat around you. What habitat is your survey area in? Are you in a grassland? Are you in a forest? What habitat surrounds your survey area? So is the hectare-sized survey area you are surveying in, is it surrounded by more grassland? Is it surrounded by different types of habitat? You also are going to record how many plant species that you encountered that were blooming during your survey in your survey area, how much of the area is in bloom. You know, as you're walking through your survey area, would you say that half of it had lots of blossoming flowers, or was it more like 10%? And then you're also going to want to record what management you observed happening at your survey area. So as you're walking through your survey area, are you seeing things like evidence of prescription fire? Like, is the soil blackened, or did you happen to see burned plants when you were surveying? Is there evidence of herbicides? Basically recording what management activities that you can visibly see evidence of as you're doing your survey. All right, so each one of these habitat assessments is paired with a bumblebee survey. So if you're doing a point survey, you're just going to do one habitat assessment with your survey. If you're doing a roadside set of surveys, you're going to do one habitat assessment at each one of your stops as you're making stops along that roadside. All right, so before you go out, you're going to want to get your equipment together. You are going to want to make sure that you have your data sheets and a writing utensil so that you can record your data. The data sheets are available on the Atlas website, so you can print those directly from PDFs that we have available online. You're also going to want to make sure that you have a net so that you can collect bumblebees. The nets from Home Science Tools or forestry suppliers are very good. You want to make sure that you get a mesh net, not a canvas net, so that you can actually see the bumblebees in the net as you're manipulating them from the net to the vial. You're also going to want to have some vials so that you can put the bees in the vials and put them in your cooler. We recommend using plastic vials, either 30 to 50 milliliters in size or 5-dram vials, but you can also use items that you find around your house, so things like old pill tubes or little tiny jelly jars also will work. You're going to want to make sure you have a cooler with ice so that you can chill your bees down. You're also going to want to have something where you can take photos of the bees, so a camera with a macro lens is preferred. You can use a DSLR, point and shoot camera, or you can also just use your smartphone if that's what you have. You're going to want to make sure you have a timer and a way to collect weather data. So once again, your phone can work for that. And then it's always really helpful to have copies of the ID guides and copies of our handbook. Those are also available on the Bumblebee Atlas website. You can print them from PDFs that we have online. All right, so, this is an online training, and it does take a little while to get a really good feel for the field protocols. So to help you figure those out, we hold in-person trainings across the states that we are in. So in Nebraska, we have a few trainings coming up. 2 of them are in Western Nebraska at Wildcat Hills and Gilbert Baker Wildlife Management Area. Those are being run by our partners at Nebraska Game and Parks. We're also having an event at Mulberry Bend Overlook, which is in the eastern part of the state. So if you're interested in those events, please go to our events page and sign up. We would love to have you and meet you. In Missouri, our partners at the Missouri Prairie Foundation are going to be holding a few events this year. Their first event is coming up on the 7th and 8th. They're having a Bio Blitz in Lockwood, Missouri. There'll be an opportunity to learn Bumblebee ID at that Bio Blitz as well. And so, these are just the events that we have planned so far. More events are to come, at least in Missouri. I think our partners at Missouri Prairie Foundation are going to plan a couple more events this year, so please keep your eye out on the newsletter. We'll announce them as they come up and are finalized. Just to reiterate, if you would like to sign up for one of these events, please check out our events page, bumblebeeatlas.org/pages/events. All right, and now I'm going to hand it off to Katie, who is going to walk you through how to submit your data.
Okay, let me get my screen shared.
Oh, I think we have a couple slides.
Oh, we have some slides first.
Yeah, just
my bad.
2.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Forgot you were driving this one. Okay, so Bumblebee Watch. If this is your first time participating in this project, bumblebeewatch.org is the website that we use to collect and house all of the data that you're going to be conducting and finding out in the field. So the map that's on the screen here is all of the bumblebee observations that people have submitted throughout the United States and Canada. And the data that is submitted to this website, all the photographs that you're out taking in the field, every single one of those is verified by experts. So in the fall, Jenny and Jared and myself spend a lot of time on Bumblebee Watch, going through your photographs, assigning them species IDs, assigning them a sex when possible. And all of this data gets used by researchers working on different projects to support bumblebees. I'm going to go to the next slide. So a few best practices for submitting data. One of those is submit your data as close to your survey date as possible. So when you're out in the field and you're filling out your data sheet, sometimes you forget to write down the temperature, or maybe you forget to write down the date. And so when you go to enter your data and you find that you made a little mistake or you left one of the spots blank, it's a lot easier to recall that information the closer you are to the survey date. So try and submit your data as soon as you can, just in case there were any mistakes on the data sheet. You're also going to want to keep track of which photographs go with which bee. So when you get to a survey site and you're collecting a lot of bees, you're going to come home to either a phone or a digital camera that is just packed full with bumblebee photos that all look very, very similar. So make sure you have a method to keep track of which set of photos go with which bee on your data sheet. And there's many ways to do this. Some people have actually laminated their data sheets and will bring like a dry erase marker to write a number or a letter by each bee. So as they're photographing, bee number 1 has a 1 next to it in every single photograph. Other people might take a picture of their bee and then take a picture of the grass to sort of make a visual barrier between the sets of bees. So whatever system works for you, great. Just make sure that you have one. And then the last thing is go through your photographs before you start the data submission process. So you can submit up to 5 photos per bee, but when you're in the field, you might take way more than 5, or some of your photos might come out blurry. So we only want you to submit the best, most clearest photographs to Bumblebee Watch. And with that, now I'm going to share my screen and we'll do a little walkthrough of Bumblebee Watch. All right, how does that look?
Looks great.
Okay, so this is the website here. If this is your first time using the site, you're going to want to go up to the top right corner and create an account for yourself. And then once you're ready to submit bees, you can either click on the left-hand panel where it says Add Bumblebee Sightings, or you can click this button here that says Add Sightings. So there's 2 ways that you can submit data. And if you conducted a survey, you did your catch, chill, and release methods, you did a habitat assessment, you're going to use this Bumblebee Atlas button. What you would use Bumblebee Watch for is anything that is an incidental sighting, a passive sighting. So this would be like if you saw a bumblebee in your backyard, or while you were walking your dog, or while you're having a beer at your friend's house, you're going to use this incidental sighting. So Bumblebee Watch is for bees that you just randomly saw, you wanted to submit, but they're not tied to a survey. Whereas Bumblebee Atlas is anything that you conducted a survey, you have your habitat data, you chilled your bees, it's going to go under here. So once you click Add Sighting, there's going to be an option to choose from your locations. So if you are surveying the same place, it's really simple. You can just click in here and it'll have a list of all the different places you've surveyed. If you're doing a roadside survey, make sure to add in this number 1 out of 5, 2 out of 5, so that we can see that you've submitted all 5 of your roadside stops. If you're surveying a new spot or it's your first time, you're going to click Add a New Location, and you can either type in the coordinates directly, or you can use this map feature, which is very handy. You can change to satellite, which I like to do. You can use the buttons to zoom in and out. You can drag the map, find your cursor here. You can use the search button. So if we zoom in, let's say I did a survey at Branched Oak. I'm going to zoom in until I find a familiar place on the map. And I'm going to say, oh yeah, I did my survey right here. And when you click on the map, it's going to drop this point, and then you hit set location. So you want to try and drop your point in the center of your survey plot. And when you hit set location, it's going to bring in your coordinates for you. And then you want to name that with some site name that is going to help you remember it. So in case you go back there again, you can be like, oh yeah, this is where I surveyed. Okay. So we're not going to use this site name at all. This is purely for you. And then the accuracy is how close you were. So if you know that is exactly where you surveyed, you can click 0 to 25. And the more uncertain you are, the higher you want to set this accuracy. And you can click the date of your sighting, the survey type. So if you did a point or a roadside, collection method. So the preferred method is this first one here, capture all observed bees, or at least tried. And this isn't going to be attainable all the time. So sometimes you might get to a survey spot and there are too many bees for you to catch. So in that case, you know, you're going to try your best to only collect bees that look different. But that obviously introduces bias, right? So when possible, try and collect everything that you find out there. This combination of capture all and capture different might be like you're halfway through your survey, you've been catching everything, but you realize that there are too many bees and you're not going to be able to catch them all. So you switch to only collecting bees that look different. And then this last one here is photo only. This is more so for people in Minnesota and Iowa that are dealing with the rusty patch bumblebee, where they can't actually handle bumblebees in a particular area. So they're only taking photographs of bees on flowers. So nobody here should be using this one unless, you know, you travel to Iowa or Minnesota. But again, try and use this first one here, capture all observed bees. How many hectares? So your hectare should be about 1, number of surveyors, start time, stop time. Survey length in minutes should equate to 45 person minutes. So again, if you have 3 people surveying, you technically only need to each look for 15 minutes. So it could be a short survey period, but that 15 times 3 adds up to 45. Temperature units, cloud cover, say it was partly cloudy that day. Wind speeds, you can put in any weather notes here, like maybe the air quality was bad, or maybe there was smoke in the air from Canada, whatever you want to add there. This habitat type of survey area, so when you are walking around collecting bumblebees, you want to take note of sort of the dominant habitat type in your area. Are you in a grassland? Are you maybe in a pasture, which would be agricultural land? Are you along a creek or a stream? You're going to select whatever is the dominant habitat type. And then you have 3 options for surrounding habitat type. So if you are in a grassland, but you are right up next to a cornfield, and then maybe on the other side of the grassland, there's a lovely creek. So there's a little bit of woodland riparian area. This just gives us a brief snapshot of what type of habitat you're surveying in. This next question here is asking about how much of the survey area is in bloom. So as you're walking around, can you actively look for bumblebees on flowers in 30% of the area or 70% of the area? Basically, how much of that space is in bloom and available for bumblebees? Next are checkboxes for things that we associate with bumblebee nesting. So again, these things you should just sort of keep in your mind as you're walking around looking for bumblebees, so that when you go to do this habitat assessment, you can be like, oh yeah, I saw brush piles, I saw rock piles, I saw rodent holes, and it's a little bit easier than having to re-walk the area looking for it. The next set of questions is about management practices that you see in the area on that day. So evidence of mowing, yes, no, or suspect. You're just going to go through and select the appropriate response. You might put suspect for something like you maybe aren't seeing cows in a pasture, right? But you are seeing cow pies or something, or maybe for honeybees is a good one to use suspect. So maybe you don't see actual hive boxes, but you see a lot of honeybees foraging in the area. You might suspect that there is a honeybee hive nearby your survey area. Management notes, again, you can write in anything there. If you maintain the land that you're surveying and you know the history and the legacy of it, sometimes it's hard to answer these questions as they apply directly, especially when it comes to like fire, right? Maybe you know that your property was burned last year, but you don't see evidence of it directly this year and you're putting no. You can write in here like, oh, we did a spring burn, or, you know, we sprayed at this point, whatever you want to add in here, you can do so. Next question is about the number of flowering plants that were in the area, so particular species. And each number that you click here will populate a space for you to fill out those plant names. A cool new feature that we have is that we've connected this database to iNaturalist now. So as you start typing a plant, let's say I saw bee balm, it's going to start populating different plants for you. If you know the species of it, that's great. You can click the species. If you don't know it, you can click the genus level or even the family level. So the higher you get, it helps us really understand what level of plant we can assess it at. Are we looking at the species level, or do we only know it was a sunflower, but we don't know which kind? So this one I know was Monarda fistulosa, wild bee balm. So I'm going to click that in there. Next, I had a thistle, but I don't know what kind of thistle it was. So I'm going to start typing in thistle. I'm going to see there's lots of things that pop up for thistle, but I'm going to go with Cirsium here. That covers a lot of different thistles. You can click the info button. It will take you to iNaturalist. You can learn more about the plant, look at different pictures to see if that's what you found. Next are questions about your volunteer effort or not. So if you're volunteering, you're going to select this box, and it's going to ask you to fill in the times that you started and stopped your survey. And this includes any driving time to get out to your survey site, any planning time of, you know, like you had to figure out where you were going, how long it was going to take you. All of that time can be included in this. You're going to record your mileage and how many hours that you spent organizing and submitting your data. And then if you used your online training resources, so not any live webinars, but if you go back later in the summer and reference this webinar again, you would select this box and just enter in how much time you spent reviewing that material. And these questions are to help us learn how much time people are contributing towards bumblebee conservation. And then the question here, did you detect bees in your survey? If you click yes, you can type your name and it'll bring you to the next page. If you click no, like you did not observe any bumblebees, you did an entire survey, when you hit proceed here, that's going to be it. You're not going to have to do anything else. We have your data, but do understand that no bumblebees detected on your surveys is still very important. So if you go out to the field, you do a whole survey, you don't find any bumblebees, please still submit that information. But I'm going to click yes, we saw bumblebees. If you forgot to fill in a section on that, it will alert you and bring you back to that with a little red arrow. But here we are in the section now to add bumblebee photos. So I'm going to click add sighting. And I'm going to have the option to select my photos. I'm going to pictures. So here you can kind of see that bumblebees all look the same when you get home. So again, make sure you have a process for keeping track of which photos go with which row on your data sheet. I'm going to select 4 here that I know were the same bee. And if you don't know the species, you can leave it as bumblebee SP. That's totally fine. If you want to take your guess, you can do that too. You can also use this identification tool. So based on the photos that you submit, you're going to answer questions. Does this bee have a yellow face, or does it have black hairs on the face? And I'm going to say mine has black. Then you go to the thorax and you can sort of look at the photos here to see if there's a stripe between the wings or a dot. I'm going to say that mine's yellow with a black dot. And as you fill out these questions here, it's going to narrow down your options of different bumblebee choices. So mine, I'm going to do brown belted and hit select. And then reference ID. So some people submit their bumblebees to iNaturalist as well. We don't encourage you to submit to 2 places because the data both ends up in the same large database. But if you do submit to both places, we encourage you to include your iNaturalist link in this reference ID so that when people are analyzing, they can easily pick out the duplicates. The sex of the bee, you can either take a guess here or put in not determined. Again, the floral host, so whatever you saw this bee on, I'm going to say this bee was on sweet clover. And then again, you have the option for a different species, or if you don't know which species it was, it's okay to hit the genus. Observation notes, if you have any, and then this private box. So the private box is only going to make the observation private, but it's not going to make your survey data private. So we encourage people to do this when they find, like a federally endangered species, like the rusty patch bumblebee. Other people like to do it if they don't want observation showing up on their private land. But when researchers go to use this data, they're able to see everything. So by checking the private box, you're obscuring observations from the public from viewing bumblebees. So then I'm going to click add sighting, and here it's going to show up. If I need to add another bee, I'm going to do the same process by clicking add sighting and go through that same step again. If you need to edit the one that you submitted, you can click edit. And when you're all done submitting your bumblebees, it will show up on your account. So if you go to your profile, you can scroll down to your checklists. Checklist is what we refer to the surveys as. You can see here's the one I just submitted, branched oak number 5. Here's the bee I saw. Here's my survey data. And you'll see that each of the bees will have a status label on them. So this one says pending, but as somebody goes through and verifies it, it will either say verified or tentative or maybe in review. So you can check back on these and see where your bees are at. You'll get a notification up here where this bell is, as well as to your email when somebody has changed the status of your bee. And I think I will pass it back to Jenny now.
I will pass it to Jared.
Here we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes, looks great.
Sweet. Okay, yes. So I'm gonna walk you through how to kind of ID some bumblebees. Here we go. So first things first, kind of the overview here. We're going to go through bumblebees. You're going to find a lot of things out there. So we're going to go through how to ID bumblebees versus flies, wasps, other bees, and then male versus female bumblebees. After that, we'll kind of go through those, the bumblebee ID features between males and females, but also just what to look for bees or for bumblebees. And then we'll go through some of the species that you guys might run into while you're out there. So this is kind of the flow chart that we go off of. So first you want to determine if you even have a bee on you. So bee or wannabe. There's a lot of different things out there flying around, quite a bit of mimicry that kind of happens, just dealing with all pollinators really. But all these things kind of look like bumblebees, but only one of them is. So a lot of convincing mimics out there, a lot of cool stuff. I think it's always better to catch more than to catch less. So after you catch something, you're not sure if it is a bee, isn't a bee, kind of go through stuff like this. So you might have a fly. But the way you tell bees versus flies apart, bees are going to have 4 wings. You kind of tell here on the right side, kind of highlighted those wings. The fly only has two wings, so one set of 4 wings present for flies. Bees are going to carry a large load of pollen. So for bumblebees, we kind of know they have corbicula, so they have big pouches on their hind legs that they might be carrying pollen. Flies won't do that. Their body might have some hair kind of sparsely throughout, but generally not too hairy. They're also going to have, bees are going to have long antennae. They're going to, generally, you can kind of see them, whether they're in the vial or they have them cold or not. They're pretty long off the body. The flies are a little shorter, a little stubbier, kind of look like just little protrusions off the front of the face. Sometimes you can't really even see them. And then for bees, the eyes are a little bit smaller, kind of long on the side of the head. And flies are going to have these big bulging eyes on the top. Sometimes they'll look like big pair of like sunglasses almost. Yeah, that's a bee versus a fly. Another thing you're going to run into probably some wasps. So these will have 4 wings. Sometimes they'll be folded, look kind of thin. They're looking a little bit more tough, a little more slender. Not too much hair, so with that they don't carry pollen either necessarily. Again, there might be some just kind of haphazardly on their body, might look a little bit dusted almost, but not too hairy. And then they can have, the color will be on their exoskeleton. So bees, the color is going to come from the hair. The hair is going to be different colors. But wasps, on the other hand, will probably just have the integument, or like kind of the skin, I guess. Maybe black and yellow, red, stuff like that. So you kind of went through that. You got something in your vial. You know it's at least a bee. There's a lot of other bees though. There's not just bumblebees. So a lot of things you're going to run into them all the time are going to be honeybees. So these are medium size, maybe a little bit smaller than bumblebees. But they're going to have a torpedo-shaped abdomen. Generally, they're going to be kind of blackish orange, gray sometimes, and they will have a pollen basket. So that's one thing you might see. You might see a bee flying around, has a big pouch full of pollen on the side, on the hind legs. So it could be a bumblebee, but it could also be a honeybee. But again, they'll be kind of blackish orange, a little bit smaller, a little torpedo shaped. And then if you get it get it on ice, you get some pictures of it. They're also going to have hairy eyes. It's a trait you probably have to look at when they're cooled down or slowed down. But bumblebees will not have hairy eyes. So that's just one way to kind of tell those apart. So we kind of go through then. You got a bumblebee, it's not a honeybee. We want to know if it's a female or a male bee. So kind of the first thing, this is probably what I look for first anytime I have a bee, after I've caught a bee at least. So the female is going to have this pollen basket, this pollen pouch on the hind leg. Been talking about it a lot. It's called the corbicula, at least for the female bumblebees, not the cuckoo bumblebees. But males, as well as cuckoo bumblebees, will not have that pollen pouch. So kind of see here down on the right, it's the circled part there, that part of the hind leg is kind of hairy. You can't really see anything below on the actual surface of the leg. Whereas the female there on the left, that circled part, it's a little bit smoother, kind of almost triangular shaped, a smooth surface. That's actually where she will pack in the pollen. But typically I'm looking for that first anytime I have a bumblebee on me. So female bumblebees will have 6 abdominal segments. Males will have 7 abdominal segments. It's a little bit tougher to see sometimes, especially towards the tip of the abdomen. They might get a little bit smaller. But yeah, females will have 6, males will have 7 segments. Similar, kind of a little bit tougher. You might have to get a good picture to see it, kind of like these here. But the antennal segments, so after the scape and pedicel, there's going to be 10 antennal segments for female bumblebees, whereas the males will have 11 antennal segments. Just kind of comes with time. You can kind of tell males apart. They're a little bit longer. It doesn't make a huge difference in antennal length, but you can kind of tell that the male's antennae do seem a little bit longer with some practice. Then stingers. So females are going to have stingers. Sometimes when you put them on ice, the stinger will kind of come out. Makes it very easy to tell that you do in fact have a female. Males won't have a stinger. Generally, nothing, the genitalia won't come out, so it's harder to tell sometimes. But yeah, they won't have that stinger. Instead, they'll just have a 7th abdominal segment. And then you can kind of see it in this picture here on the bottom. That male has big eyes, kind of, you can see the reflection coming off of it. So females will have kind of smaller eyes, normal sized eyes, a little bit almost flush with the face, it seems like. Whereas males of some species of bumblebees, their eyes are kind of really big and kind of puff off the face, especially towards the top. You can kind of tell here, you can see that the eyes are way wider on the bottom, on that bottom bee, as opposed to the female on the top. And then this is kind of just broadly speaking, the females are typically more well-groomed. The hairs lay a little bit more flat on the thorax and on the abdomen, sometimes on the underside of the abdomen as well. A little bit more just kind of cleanly kept, whereas the males can get really shaggy, kind of like this bee here. It's a little bit species dependent, I'd say, but just broadly speaking, if you get a bee in, it's kind of covered haphazardly with pollen and very shaggy looking, there's a good chance it's going to be a male. Okay, so we'll get into the cuckoo bees now. So we've kind of gone through, you have a female bee or a male bumblebee. There are also some cuckoo bees. These are parasitic bees, socially parasitic bees of bumblebees. So the cuckoo bumblebees will not have pollen baskets. So since they're parasitic, they don't need to carry pollen, so they've kind of lost that corbicula. So in this left picture, it looks probably more similar to a male's leg, where there's no smooth, shiny surface. Like you can kind of see here on the right, that pollen basket, nicely kind of framed up by those side hairs, and the kind of smooth portion in the middle. The cuckoo bumblebees will not have that. That's probably the main thing I look for, especially if I think I have a cuckoo. It's a little bit, some of the other characters are a little bit tougher to see, but this is kind of an easy one to see. So generally, the cuckoo bumblebees will have kind of sparsely hairy abdomens. The hairs are typically a little bit shorter, not quite as much of it, won't cover all of the integument. So you can kind of see here on the left, this cuckoo bumblebee, you can see all the way down to the integument. You get a little bit of a reflection almost off of that with the light, whereas our normal bumblebees will be pretty much covered all the way down the abdomen by hair. So you're not seeing too closely down to the integument. Yeah, that's kind of my two favorite key characters for cuckoos versus normal bumblebees. This one kind of comes with time though. So the cuckoo bumblebee, the abdomen will be curved down. So typically, the tip of the abdomen almost points straight down, assuming the bee's kind of laid flat almost. Normal bumblebees, abdomen won't be quite as curved. Sometimes it might look curved, it's just the way it's sitting. But really it kind of comes down and it's nice tapered down to a point almost for the cuckoo bumblebees. This is another one. This is a little bit easier to see when you're getting pictures. But so the normal bumblebee, the head won't quite be as thick almost when you're talking about from the thorax up to the the top of the head. For normal bumblebees, that space isn't super long, whereas the cuckoo bumblebees kind of gives them a thick head appearance. So this is one more thing to look for. If you think you have a cuckoo bumblebee, make sure you try to get a good picture of this top of the head to really get a good comparison. But there you go. So apparently now you've caught what you assume to be a bumblebee, and we can kind of get into what to look for and how to ID these. So typically with, I think this should be linked on the website, but everyone will have these kind of ID guides depending on what state or what area you're doing surveys in. This will kind of give you a quick little run through of what to look for when you have a bumblebee on you. So this is for Missouri, this is our field guide. We kind of split this up into two things. So you have a bumblebee, you know it's bumblebee. We want you to look for if the first abdominal segment is yellow, like here on the left. The first abdominal segment is yellow, you can look at these 6 species that it might be. If the first abdominal segment is black, you kind of use these instead. It could be any of these 4. And we'll kind of get into some of the ways to ID them a little bit later on, but just generally, this is kind of how you split. After you initially have a bee, but we have 8, 10, 12 options sometimes, but it's easier to kind of split it off and see what are the main characters off the bat that we're looking for to kind of narrow down our options. And then, so for Nebraska, we have a few more options than us in Missouri. But the way we kind of have this set up, it could either be if the first abdominal segment is yellow, you might have one of these 8. If there's any amount of orange on that bee, it might be these 4. And then if the first abdominal segment is black, it might be these 8 species. So again, it's just kind of, it won't get you perfectly down, but at least gives you a good starting spot on how to start or what to really look for when you have a bee on you that you might not know off the bat. And then the Dakotas, even crazier. I do not have any experience with these, but something similar. We kind of have it split up into 5 groups. And these 5 groups are going to be numbered here. We should have a nice little table down here for you guys. So the first turga is black. For the next group, there's white or pale hairs present. Third group, first turga is yellow. Group 4, orange or red hair is present. And 5 are just the cuckoo bees. And then the bumblebees of Kansas, similar to Missouri. We're just going to have you start off as the first abdominal segment yellow, or it's the first one black. So not too many options, but at least narrow it down a little bit for you. And then also with that, so this should be on the back side of those kind of handouts. These are kind of the ways that you go through step by step of what to look for physically on the bee. You kind of look for what traits to look for. Kind of go through steps 1, 2, and 3. Kind of prompt you with, are you looking at the face? Are you looking at the head? Prompt you with questions on, kind of get you thinking about what are you looking at? And the point of this is just to kind of have you run through a checklist of, are you looking at the right things and are you taking the right pictures to be able to ID that later on, or for us to be able to ID it from a picture after the fact. This will all be with you. I think we're going to go through this actual anatomy now. I've kind of alluded to some of these parts beforehand, but there's kind of 3 main parts that we're looking at when we go through bumblebee ID. So the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. And when we talk about the abdomen, we're talking about those tergites that we're talking about, the abdominal segments. So kind of have them labeled T1 through T6. But the overhead view then, kind of what we're looking at with a real bee. So the thorax, we kind of have it split up into 3 parts here. So it's kind of the upper third, the middle third, and the lower third. Really, the middle third is between the wings. You might see some mention of that when you're going through ID stuff, looking for the color between the wings. And it's really the middle third that we're looking for that. I think we'll be good. All right, so we're gonna start with the common eastern bumblebee. So this one's gonna be kind of all over. Everyone should be probably kind of familiar with it. If you're not, you will probably get familiar with it this summer. It's a very common bee, but what we're looking for here, talking about the head again, kind of looking at the face. The face is gonna be black for this bee. These are the key characters for the females, so the queens and workers of these species. We'll probably do males at a different time, but the front of the face here is going to be black, and the top of the head is going to be yellow. You kind of see it between the eyes here on this bee. And then the thorax, mostly yellow with a kind of black circle or teardrop in the center. And then the abdomen, only T1 for the common eastern bumblebee is going to have yellow on it. T2 through T6 is going to be black. Really the key character I kind of look for this is that big kind of spot on the thorax. It kind of bleeds out. It looks a little almost filled in with yellow sometimes, but there's a big teardrop shape, and then only T1 has yellow on it. You can be pretty sure that you have a common eastern bumblebee. The wings also are typically a little more translucent. You might pick up that with time. That's another thing to look for if you're not quite sure. Okay, so another fairly common one, especially in the early season, is our two-spotted bumblebee, found throughout most of the states, shown here. But the front of the head, the face area, it's going to be black. The top of the head is going to be yellow this time. It's usually pretty obvious for this species. It's pretty yellow. And the thorax, again, mostly yellow, but this one will have a little bit more of a concise dot, black circle in the middle. It's shown pretty well here on the picture on the right. Abdomen, T1, all yellow, and then T2 is going to have a yellow W. Sometimes it's a little, this is a very, very pronounced W here on this bee. Looks awesome. Sometimes it can be a little bit more like a half circle though, a little bit more reduced, can be a little bit smaller, hard to see. But really you're looking for a shape of color on T2, kind of in this middle third area of T2. That's kind of the key character that I'm really looking for this species. And T3 through T6 will all be black as well. So the two-spot bumblebee, kind of key takeaway, look for a W or kind of a half circle on T2. Okay, so the brown-belted bumblebee. This is another one. This is found all over. Be hard not to find these almost, but still a great bee nonetheless. So the front of the face, again, going to be black. Top of the head, also black. Similar to the two-spotted bumblebee on the thorax, it's going to be a pretty nice, concise black circle in the center. And then when we get down to the abdomen, T1 is going to be yellow, and T2 is going to have a brown or yellow crescent. So it's kind of where it gets its name, brown-belted bumblebee. And T3 through T6 is going to be black. So really the key character here is going to be the color on T2. It could be, this is a fairly reduced brown belt on this one here. It could be almost half of T2 being brown. Could be half of T2 looking almost like a yellowish gray color. There's a ton of variation. So this one gets confused with the two spot quite a bit. But what I'm kind of looking for, if I'm not sure, if I have a bee that looks like this, maybe this brown belt in the middle is a little bit more yellow, you can't quite see it. If you can get pictures that show the color going all the way to the sides of the bee, so yeah, it's kind of tough to see this, but if it goes all the way to the lateral sides of the bee, that color, it might be really, really kind of pinched off at the corners. That's what we're looking for the brown belt. In a perfect world, they're all brown belt, they go all the way. There's no questions about it. It's not always how it goes. There's a lot of variation, but yeah, that's what I'm kind of looking for the brown belt. And then kind of a bonus key character. These bees are pretty well kept. I'm kind of give them a buzz cut is what we call it, especially on the thorax. The hairs are a little bit shorter, really, really clean and neat. You kind of see it over time, pick up a little bit more, but that's what we're looking for the species. Okay, and then my personal favorite, the Southern Plains bumblebee. So Bombus returnus, species of conservation concern in Missouri. It's not found throughout, it's maybe found geographically throughout, but not found very often, a lot of time in these states. But what we're kind of looking for here, again, we'll start from the top. So the head, the front, the face is going to be black, top of the head going to be black. And when we get down to the thorax, we're kind of moving away from those spots in the middle of the thorax. And now we have a black stripe between the wings, kind of a nice black band. And then you'll have yellow on the kind of upper third of the thorax and then on the lower third of the thorax. So it's a really, really nice pronounced black band between the wings for this species. And then T1 yellow, T2 yellow, and then T3 through T6 black. The key character for this species is that the hairs on the abdomen are laid all the way flat. You can kind of tell here a little bit. It's especially noticeable when you really get the bee and you kind of get a nice side profile of the bee. The hairs are like almost against the abdomen, really. When you look at other bumblebees, they're a little bit more erect, kind of stand straight up, look fuzzier. This is a really sleek and kind of slim looking bee most of the time. Kind of the same, that's got a bit of a buzz cut similar to the thorax of the brown bell that we just went over. So similar hair length and kind of way it's kept is similar to that, but this one will have the nice black band between the wings and then the hair on the abdomen kind of bored flat. Very, very cool bee. Okay, the American bumblebee. So this is another one, a conservation concern found throughout all these states, but what we're looking for here, the front of the face, again, it's going to be black. Top of the head is very important, also black. And the thorax, so again, we're not looking for that kind of spot as in the first three we covered, but here we're looking for yellow in front of the wings, so upper third. Between the wings is going to be black stripe, and then below that, the bottom third of the thorax could be black or yellow, or kind of a mix of those colors of hairs. It's pretty variable. Then when we get down to the abdomen, what we're looking for here is that T1 will be at least half yellow and half black, or well, yeah, at least half yellow. And then kind of the part closest to the thorax will be black, if it is black at all. T2 and T3 will be yellow. T4 through T6 is going to be black. So this is, if you're familiar with these species, it's very similar to another one. What we're really looking for here is kind of this nice shot of T1 to see what color it really is, as well as a nice shot of the top of the head, kind of the eyebrow area, to see if it's black or yellow. The species that it's most commonly kind of mixed up with is the black and gold bumblebee. So superficially looks very, very similar, a little bit more uncommonly found throughout the states. But the front of the face is going to be black, and then the top of the head, it's kind of eyebrow area, is going to be yellow. You can see it here, just above the eyes, you get a little patch yellow there. That's kind of a key character for this species. Similar to before, yellow and on the upper third, front of the wings, black stripe between the wings, and then typically yellow behind the wings on that lower third of the thorax. T1 of the abdomen is going to be black. T2 and T3 will be yellow, and then T4 through T6 will be black. So T1 is mainly black. It might have, like, right on the corners, might have a little bit of yellow. It's really important to get a good picture of T1 for this species and the American that it gets mixed up with. I actually go over that. Oh yeah, here we go. So this is kind of talk about these two species being similar. It's very hard. You need to get good pictures of them. It can be kind of hard to get pictures of these traits, but here's a couple good examples. So again, that black and gold, so the yellow on top of the hair is kind of coined as the yellow eyebrows. You can see them here on the left. Really, really nice, really well pronounced. There is some variation in that. You might not always be super obvious that there's yellow there. So just try to get a really nice, clean picture if at all possible. And then the American will have black on top of the head. So again, won't have that eyebrow look, will just be a lot of black hairs. Nothing too showy, I guess. And then, like I talked about, so T1 for the black and gold should be black, but occasionally you'll get these kind of corners of yellow towards T2. And sometimes the hair looks like it might be black, or it might be rubbed off in the middle of T1. But again, you're really, like we talked about before, you want a good, clear picture of the top of the head as well, just to really be sure that you do have what you have. Then the American bumblebee, T1, nice bottom half yellow of T1, nice top half black for T1, and then black hairs on the head as before. But really, really common to mix these up. It's really hard to tell sometimes, so just try to get good pictures if at all possible. Okay, the yellow bumblebee, another species of conservation concern, mostly in the northern parts of the states. The front of the face here is going to be black, top of the head going to be black. This one will have a really nice, so the upper and lower third of the thorax will be all yellow, really nice golden yellow color. And more of a narrow black band between the wings here. It's really clean and concise. Looks really, really well kept. And then kind of a standout bee in that T1 through T4 are all going to be yellow, and T5 and T6 are going to be black. So if you think you have one of these, just try to get a good picture of the top of the thorax. You can kind of see that narrow band, as well as get a nice clean open shot of the abdomen. So you can kind of tell that T1 through T4 are all yellow, and then I guess also get a picture to make sure it's a female. Very, very, very cool bee as well. And then is this where I pass it off to Katie, or am I doing this one?
You're actually passing off to me, Jared, but thank you so
Okay.
much. That was wonderful.
Yes, no problem. Yes.
You did a great job. If you want to leave the slides up, I can just let you know when I would like you to move to the next slide, if that's okay.
Yep, sounds good. Take over.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm going to go through some of the species that you may encounter in the region that have a slightly more restricted geographic range. Just as a heads up, we're not going to be able to cover every single species you might encounter in the Midwest or Great Plains, but we are going to cover the more common ones. So the next species that we have on the docket is the half-black bumblebee, Bombus vagans. This is a species of interest in Missouri because we are just at the bottom of its range. But it is a species that you will encounter in the upper Midwest fairly frequently. This species is called the half-black bumblebee because its abdomen looks half black. If you see that image there on your right, the first two segments of the abdomen are yellow, the others are black, and that gives it that half-black look. So other things to look out for this bee, the hairs on the front of the face are going to be black, and then on the top of the head are going to be yellow. The thorax is yellow with a black dot right in the center there. And then, as I mentioned, the abdomen is going to be yellow on T1 and T2. The rest of the abdominal segments are going to be completely black. This bee is a little bit shaggier compared to some other bees, and it tends to be a little bit on the smaller side as well. Jared, you can go ahead to the next slide. Next bumblebee, red-belted bumblebee, Bombus rufosinctus, another species that you'll most often see in the upper Midwest, in the Black Hills area as well. So this species of bumblebee is called the red-belted bumblebee because it often has lots of red hairs on the abdomen. Other distinguishing features for this bee, on the head, their hairs on the front of the face can be yellow or black. The hairs on the top of the head will be yellow. On the thorax, their thorax will be yellow with a black band or circle between the wings. It often has almost an eye shape look, where it gets a little bit narrower towards the wing joints and a little bit wider in the center. The abdomen of this bee, super variable in color patterns. As I mentioned, that it's called the red-belted bumblebee because it often has red hairs on the abdomen. Not always the case. Some of the species or some of the individuals that you'll encounter will be completely black, or will only have black hairs as opposed to red hairs. So keep an eye out for that. In general, for this species, T1 will always be completely yellow, and then you'll see a sort of crescent of yellow hairs on T2. And then T2 through 5 can have black or yellow hairs. And then T6 will be black, and some individuals will have this sort of racing stripe of yellow hairs on T5. So not all of the time, but sometimes you'll see a little stripe of yellow hairs on the very bottom as well. So as I mentioned, highly variable color patterns. Jared, if you want to move to the next slide, you will see all sorts of variants of this species when you're out in the field. So on the left-hand side, we have a more red individual that has that yellow hair on T1, that yellow crescent on T2, and then the rest of the hairs on the abdominal segment are red. On the other end, on the right-hand side, we have the opposite sort of bee, where it has that yellow hair on T1, that yellow crescent on T2, and then it's black all the way down, except for that little racing stripe of yellow hairs. So what you really want to look for this species is yellow hairs on T1, that crescent of yellow hairs on T2, and then some red or black hairs the rest of the way down. Excuse me 1 second.
Just to chime in here while Jenny's taking a moment, if you see X's and dots on the maps, the X's are showing incidental observations and the dots are showing observations that were collected during an actual survey.
Thanks, Katie. Whew, I have a little bit of a cough. My apologies. Hopefully I'll be able to keep trucking. Okay. Moving onward, I hope. Jared, if you want to go to the next slide. The next bumblebee that we have on the list is the Hunt's bumblebee. Once again, a species that you will find in the northern Great Plains. It's a more westernly distributed species, so not one that you're going to find in eastern Nebraska or Missouri, very often, at least in Nebraska. Excuse me. Whew. So this species has yellow hairs on the front of its face, yellow hairs on the top of its head, profuse yellow hairs on the front of its face. So that's a key thing to look out for this species. The thorax of this bee is mostly yellow. It's going to have a black band between the wings. The abdomen coloration is pretty distinct. It has yellow on T1, T2 and 3 are going to be orange, T4 will be yellow, and T5 through 6 will be black. Go ahead, Jared, to the next slide. The next bee that we have on the list is the Nevada bumblebee, Bombus nevadensis. I'm so sorry. Bombus nevadensis. This is a bee that you will also find in the northern Great Plains. Has a slightly more western distribution compared to some of the other species that we've talked about. This species has black hairs on the top of the head, black hairs on the front of the face. Its thorax is yellow with a black circle in the middle. Its abdomen has T1 yellow or black, T2 through 3 yellow, and then T4 through 6 black. This bee has a sort of rectangular shaped body. In that image of the bee there, you can kind of see it sort of blocky looking, and that's something to look out for this species. Jared, you can go ahead. All right, the next bee that we're going to talk about is the lemon cuckoo bumblebee, Bombus citrinus. So this is a species that you will find in the eastern part of the Midwestern United States. You may occasionally find it in Nebraska or sometimes in Missouri. So this species has black hairs on the front of the face, although sometimes you'll also see yellow hairs there. Yellow hairs on the top of the head. The thorax of this bee will be completely yellow. Sometimes it will look like it almost has a dot of black in between the wing joints. That's just kind of a place where the hairs are sparser. The abdomen of this bee can be a little bit variable. Some of the individuals you'll encounter will have yellow on T1. Some of them will have completely black T1. Generally for this bee, the abdomen will be mostly dark with yellow sort of concentrated on T3. So for some individuals, the abdomen can be almost completely black. There'll just be a little bit of yellow on the sides of the third abdominal segment. You'll encounter lighter individuals that have yellow on T1 and then yellow on T3, and maybe you'll get a little bit on T4, but that yellow hair is concentrated on T3. You can go ahead, Jared. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to go through every single cuckoo bumblebee that you may encounter in the region, but just some key things to look out for if you think you have found a cuckoo female. Generally, for cuckoos, their yellow hairs will be concentrated at the end of their abdomen, so either on T3 or T4, and they also tend to be more concentrated on the sides of the abdomen. So for lots of other species, you'll usually see some yellow hairs, in the center of T2 for the non-cuckoos. Cuckoos are kind of the opposite. They have their yellow hairs concentrated on the margins of their abdomen and at the very end. So something to look out for if you think you have a cuckoo. Be sure to just try to take lots of pictures if you see something that you think could be a cuckoo. It helps us with ID quite a bit. Right. And as I mentioned, we haven't covered every single species that you may encounter in the region. If you see a bee that we haven't mentioned and you think looks a little bit funny, just be sure to reference your ID guide and try to take as many pictures as you can because it's probably a rarer species. Go ahead, Jared. All right, so moving on to what photos should you take to photo document your bees? There are a few different angles that we recommend you take pictures of for every single bee that you catch when you're out doing your surveys. The first angle that we would love a good photo of is the face and the head. You want to capture the hair coloration on the front of the face and the top of the head. It's an important ID characteristic for lots of different species. You also want to capture what we call the cheek length. So some bumblebees have a longer looking face that's almost horsey sort of looking. Other bumblebees will have a short face that is sort of roundish, and that's because they have different lengths of cheeks. So capturing that feature is really important for IDing some species. The next thing that we like to be able to reference for some species is the length of some of the antennal segments. For males, this is particularly important for some species of cuckoo male. If you think you have a cuckoo male, try to take a really good picture of the antenna so that we can look at the length of each one of those segments. All right, go ahead, Jared. All right, the next angle that we would like a really good photo of is the side profile of the bee. So this is really important for both sexing bees and for identifying their species. From the side profile view, we can get a good look at their leg, whether or not they have those pollen baskets can be really clear from the side profile view. It also gives us a good look at what's going on underneath the wing joints. So what color are the hairs underneath the wing joints? What color are the hairs on the thorax? Does it have a black band between the two wing joints? Does it have a circle of hairs? And then also it gives us a good look at some of the abdominal segments as well. Jared, you can go ahead. All right, the next angle that we like a good view of is sort of a top-down view of the bee with the wings completely spread out. So we can see every single one of those abdominal segments and what color they are. So when you're taking your top-down photo of your bee, try to make sure that the wings are spread out so that you can see each one of those segments. You can use your fingers to do this, or if you're not comfortable with that, a pair of tweezers or even a blade of grass, you can just sort of gently push the wings apart so that you can get a photo of all of those segments completely visible. And go ahead, Jared. All right, so just some tips for taking really great photos of bumblebees so that we can tell what species they are from your pictures. The first tip is to make sure that your photos are in focus. If your photos are really blurry, it can be really hard for us to see what's going on with each bee that we're looking at. Go for it, Jared. The next thing you want to do is make sure to check your lighting. You don't want to take a picture of a bee that's too dark or too light because it can be a lot harder to see the different features of each bee. So, you can adjust the lighting on your camera, or you can move the bee from a area that's really bright. So if you're outdoors, there's going to be a lot of light most of the time if it's a sunny day. Moving the bee into the shade or into the light can also help you get the lighting right for your photo. Go ahead, Jared. Right, so you don't want your photos to be too dark. You also don't want your photos to be too light and bleached out because then we can't get a good look at the bee that you are photographing. Go ahead, Jared. Our next tip is to make sure that you get a good view of the face by flipping the bee on its back. So this is a really good way to make sure that you are capturing the cheek length of the bee. If you have your bee on its belly, they kind of tuck their head in a little bit when they get cold and they curl up. So it can be hard to see everything that's going on with the face. If you flip it on its back, then it's a lot easier to get that angle that we need of the bee's face. Go for it, Jared. All right, our next tip is make sure that you're not taking your bees photos while they're in vials. You want to make sure that you move them out of the vial onto a piece of paper or another surface, because vials are just one more thing that's going to be in the way between the bee and your camera. Sometimes they can get fogged up and sometimes they can get dirty and scratched, and taking pictures of bees in vials is just, it never works out. These are actually photos that I took early on when I was in my career of different bumblebees, and I thought that I might be able to get a good ID from them, and I was wrong. It's way easier just to take them out once they're cool and then take a picture. Go ahead, Jared. All right, our next photo tip. You want to make sure that your vials are sealed before you place them on ice. If they're leaky, sometimes the bee can get all wet, and then it's way harder to see the hair color patterns because, you know, the hair gets darker when it's wet, it gets all clumpy, and a dry bee is way easier to identify than a wet one. Also, you don't want your bees to drown in the water. It's better for them if they are not all wet when you release them, so that they can breathe. Okay, go for it, Jared. All right, next photo tip. We have a grid sheet that's available as a PDF. If you go to the print materials page of the Bumblebee Atlas website, you can download our extra, it's called the extra Bumblebee data sheet. And on the back of that, there's a nice grid that you can print out. You can put your bees on that grid when you take a picture so that we can get a good idea of how big they are. Some bumblebees are bigger than others, some are really little, some are huge, and the grid sheet helps us measure out exactly what size the bee is. Go ahead, Jared. All right, that wraps up the content of our presentation. I think we'll have some time for questions at the end, which will be really great. But before we get into that, I just want to say thank you so much for being here with us today. You know, it's a Saturday and you guys are sacrificing your time to attend this presentation, and we so appreciate you. If you have any questions about any of the content, please reach out to us. You can contact us at the following email addresses. If you're in the Great Plains, greatplains.bba@xerces.org. If you're in Missouri, mobumblebees@xerces.org. And if you're in Nebraska, any Bumblebee Atlas at xerces.org. Go ahead, Jared. Before we wrap up, I just want to give a big thanks to our supporters. As we mentioned earlier, the Bumblebee Atlas is a Xerces affiliated set of projects in Missouri, Nebraska, and the Great Plains. And we can do this work because we have lots of support from various organizations, as well as all of you. If you want to go ahead, Jared. You know, we are also a member-supported organization, so if you are not already a Xerces member, please check out our website. You can help us in our work by joining. You can learn more at xerces.org. And with that, I think we can go ahead and have some time for questions. There is one answered question that I would like to go over verbally. It sounded like somebody had a problem when they tried to email us about permits for Nebraska. Their email got a bounce back. Stephanie posted that you can go ahead and email her at stephanieparis@nebraska.gov. If you already emailed us to the Nebraska Bumblebee Atlas email, please make sure that you got a response from us. I'm not sure what's going on with the bounce back situation, but if you didn't receive a response from us acknowledging that we received your email and you would like to be added to the permit, please make sure that you heard back from us just so that we can confirm that we've gotten your email. And if you haven't received a response, yeah, please reach out to Stephanie or Katie or I directly. I can post our email addresses in the chat so that we can confirm that we're adding you to that permit. Yeah, and I think we have a few open questions that we can go over verbally. So we had a couple questions about how long we should cool the bees, and that answer really depends on the species and how hot it is outside and the size of the bee that you are trying to cool down. So a bigger bee, so if you've caught a species that it tends to be very large, or you've just caught a really large individual, it's going to take a little bit longer to cool down than if you caught a smaller bee. And also if it's really hot outside, it's going to take a little bit longer to chill your bee down as well. So I'd say generally, if you have a bee on ice for about 15 minutes, it should be cooled down by the time you go and check on it. But if you're opening your cooler quite a bit, it might take a little bit longer. You're just going to have to play it by ear. Once your bee has stopped sort of moving around and crawling around, it will be still. Then you know it's time that you can take a photograph. If you have any other questions that you're thinking of right now, please make sure to type it in the Q&A so that we can answer them before we have to wrap up. And then I'll ask my other panelists, are there any other questions that you would like to answer live?
I will bring one up that was asked about if we can catch bumblebees on while they're doing things other than visiting flowers, which I thought was a great question. And the answer to that is yes, you can catch bumblebees while they are on the wing, which is what we call it when you just catch it out of the air, when they're resting on other vegetation, when they're nest searching. Anything to add, Jenny?
I don't think so. I would add though that if you are out collecting bees, you know, I think it is a lot easier to catch bumblebees when they're on flowers as opposed to when they are like flying through the air. So if you are out collecting, it's okay if you don't want to like swing wildly at a bumblebee just because you see it. It's okay if you see a bee flying by and you can't catch it. Just make a note that you missed the bee in your notes at the bottom of your data sheet, and you can type that information in when you're submitting your data when you go ahead and submit to Bumblebee Watch. But yeah, it's okay not to swing at everything if you're not comfortable. Generally, it's a lot easier to catch bees on flowers, but if you are comfortable, you can go ahead and try to catch those bees as well.
And something else too, as you sign off of this webinar today, there's going to be a survey that pops up that's very short, very brief. If you could take a few seconds to fill that out, it really helps us improve this content and learn about what you liked, what you wish you could have learned. So take a few seconds to fill that out if you can.
All right. Yeah, I see that we've gotten a few other great questions. So what if you don't know the names of the flowers? I think the answer to that is just try your best. If you're not positive, you don't want to give us information that could potentially be like super inaccurate. So if you're not sure of the species, you know, you don't want to record it unless you're sure of what plant the bee is on. It's okay to use sort of general categories for the plants. So if you see the bee is on bee balm or something like that, you can just record bee balm and then put in the genus Monarda when you go to submit your data. If you're really not sure and you're just like, this, I think is some sort of mint or sunflower, you can input the family information there, mints or sunflowers when you go to submit your data. You can also use apps like iNaturalist. If you are in the field and you see a flower, you can take a few pictures of it on iNaturalist. And then that will give you an output that is generally pretty good for things just like genus. You don't want to, I generally don't use iNaturalist to identify plant species, but if I take a picture of a plant and I see that the first few suggestions are the same genus, I think that's a pretty good hint that that's the genus of plant that I'm looking at. How long does the bee stay immobile once removed from ice? That's a great question. Really depends on how hot it is outside. If it's really hot, it will not stay immobile for very long. So on occasion, I've had to put a bee back on the ice to chill it down enough long enough to take lots of photos. If it's a cool day, you generally will have a while before the bee will warm up. But if it's warm, my first suggestion is to try to move your cooler into the shade. So sometimes I'll just use the shade of like my car to do my photos so that it doesn't get too hot. Sometimes I will take my photos. I'll bring like a plastic plate or something and keep it in my cooler and then take the photos of my bees on that plastic plate so that they're on like a cold surface to keep them a bit cooler. But I would expect them to warm up in a few minutes if it's very warm outside. All right, so our next question that's popped up, is there a time of day when the bees are more active? So it depends on the weather. Generally, bees are going to be most active when the temperatures are between 60 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So if it's, full swing of summer and it's very hot outside, that will be earlier in the morning than if you are doing surveys in early June and the weather is a little bit cooler out. I would say 10 a.m. is usually a great time to go out and do surveys. If you're just looking for general feedback. It's not right in the morning, but it's not right in the afternoon before things get really, really hot.
It also depends on the floral resources that the bees are using. Some flowers only produce nectar in the morning and won't replenish until the next day. Same thing with pollen. And it also depends on how many other bees are out competing for those resources as well. So there's a lot of factors that can affect bee activity.
All right, well, I think that wraps us up for today. Once again, thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate your time. So excited for the upcoming field season. I hope you all have a wonderful time participating in the Atlas and that you see lots of amazing and super rare species.